Hello. It is episode 203 of the Focused Mindset podcast. And I'm excited that you're with me today because you get to listen in on a conversation that I had a few weeks back with two of my good friends who are also school counselors, Sarah Hainsworth and Sarah Gonzolez. They teamed up to write a book that's a little mini manual on how to raise teens. Now, I know we talk a lot about mindset. We talk a lot about conversation skills. And so you are going to love this because we talk exactly that. What is the mindset of a teenager? And what are some conversation skills that we can use to be able to develop a relationship that's lasting and help them be safe? You're going to like every single minute of these little bite-sized nuggets that we're going to get. Now, what's the book called? Help. My teen didn't come with a manual. And you can find this on Amazon. I'll talk about this again at the end. I think it might get cut off. So I'm telling you right now, get it on Amazon. You're going to love it. And let's listen into this conversation. Authors, I have Sarah Hainsworth and Sarah Gonzolez with me. They wrote the book, Help! My Teens Did Not Come with a Manual. Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
But you know what, Sarah H., we have been talking about this for how long now? Way too long. Like we're all busy counselors and it's like we see each other and we're like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this for sure. And then, but now here we are and this is super duper exciting. I was just excited when the book came out because I have a teenager myself. So I ordered it. It's on its way. But how did you guys come together to write this? Give me a little background on how this even came about.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll start and then Sarah can tell you how she ended up in my office. So we actually were counselors at Norco High together. I want to say, 19 years ago? I think it's 19 years. And so we were both new counselors and we had clicked right away. So we spent a lot of time consulting in each other's offices and just really became really good friends too. And then one day, go ahead, Sarah.
And then one day, I told Sarah, I said, I keep having a dream that we should write a book. Do you want to write a book with me? And she said, yes.
That's the right answer.
Yes, she said, without hesitation. And I think the premise of that was that we hear so many stories in our offices, and we really just wanted the parents to be able to have that knowledge, that information, because that confidentiality piece, as counselors, was preventing us from doing that. And so this is a way to kind of present some common themes that parents are dealing with or that teens are going through and experiencing. And so we really wanted to kind of say, these are common themes that we've been seeing for several years. And here's some simple parenting tips that you may be doing or maybe you haven't tried or maybe you need to revisit. So we're really excited about that.
That's true. As counselors, it's so interesting the things that we hear. And there's too many times when we're like, if only the parents could really hear what we're hearing on our end. And that's happened at every level. Whether it be elementary, middle, or high school that I've counseled at, they're all at different stages, but they all are just so precious when they're trying to express themselves. But the relationship between parents and teenagers specifically can get really icky, sometimes messy, kind of annoying. The whole thing that we hear, it's true. It happens. Do you guys have teenagers, or what's your kid situation like?
So I have.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
okay.
Each.
So I have two teen boys. I have a 13 and 15. And yeah, so I'm a boy mom, and I'm in it with everybody. It's not just about the school counselor component of myself. It's also that mom piece. And I know that was really important for me and Sarah to kind of look at that, not just as a professional, as a mental health professional, but also just kind of exploring that as a parent. And it's difficult. It's really hard. And we want to do our best. And we know that we love our kids more than anything. But we also are humans and we have our own feelings and emotions. So yeah, it's been really that journey of blending those two things together.
Yeah. What about your family, Sarah G?
So I have two boys as well. I'm a boy mom as well. I have a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old. And Yeah, I'm with Sarah. It when we were writing the books, it took us many years because again, we were being moms and full-time counselors. But as we were writing the book, we were living it and just hearing everything in their office. And sometimes it was like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna let my kids out of the house. And then other times it was, oh, they're gonna be okay. And so, yeah, so it's just been like it was just a really cool journey, even writing the book and really doing our research and, us taking parenting classes and getting taught to do parenting classes. And so it was cool using what we said. So everything in the book is actually how we really raised our kids. Like a lot of it is us and just what we had learned and tried. And so we got to practice on our kids. So you don't have to, we got to see what works.
You're like, this was an epic fail. So let me tell you about this one.
Yeah, and you know what? Kid to kid is different, right? I only have two, but oh my gosh, my oldest, so easy. I mean, just so easy. And my youngest, I mean, oh my gosh, every step of the way. Sometimes me and him would be like, I don't like you. And I'm like, I don't like you either.
Exactly.
It's very real.
My daughter just turned 16. So, and we're celebrating, and I'm just looking at how much she changed in 1 year, just from 15 to 16. And I was looking at the pictures and what you do, and you're just like, wow, she's like a little woman now. It's just so crazy to watch your kid move from childhood to adulthood. It's just it's a surreal experience sometimes. It really is.
Oh, absolutely. I'm in the thick of the launching phase now where we're just trying to launch them like little birds out of the nest. And so that's been really like another cool phase that I just didn't know a lot about, like realize what that journey was going to be like. So it's super cool.
Yeah.
Parenting's cool.
It is. And, specifically being a parent that's chose to also have a career and be very active in our own life. And we're very aware of the mental health side of how we need to take care of ourselves. And I think that the reason why this book is so apropos right now is because it really is challenging to find um, the balance of how to be that parent when we're also in a place in our life where we're thinking about what we are also wanting to do, not selfishly, just because, long after our kids are on their own, we're going to have the things that we do and we want to be focused on that as well. And so I thought maybe we would take a minute to talk about that. Like, what are some of the challenges that you think that parents accidentally kind of roll into? I mean, let's just talk about that whole balance piece first. Because we kind of I think that parents deal a lot with finding a balance of how they can be there for their kids, but not be there too much. But they also have things going on in their own life. And what do you guys think? How can you speak to helping us parents that are all in the thick of this?
Yeah, and I think also that it is a blend. I grew up with my mom at home, and I think that I ended up really being thankful for that experience. But in turn, it kind of turned into a little bit of mom guilt for kind of finding that blend of my career and my experiences. And even though I'm very grateful that my mom was able to do that, my parents were able to do that for me and my brother. But I think on the flip side also is that instead of looking at it as that way, it's more about modeling for my children about finding that blend, finding your own purpose and passion in a career. And I think also just kind of modeling that hard work, but also like finding time for that family and really having them understand that they are my number one priority. But I also am more than just a mom, right? I wear all these different hats and I'm proud of myself for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in turn, they can be proud of you. It's not something that's a negative. It's something that makes us a well-rounded, individual, I think. And I can speak to that as well, it can be a challenge, but it's really only a challenge if your mindset is that it's a problem. If it's not a problem, it's just a part of who you are, then it becomes an asset, hopefully, to our parenting, if that makes sense. But when have you found, Sarah G., I know you can speak on this as a counselor of high school, because I know Sarah H. and we are right now in the elementary realm as far as counseling goes, which I love. But you are the one counselor out of the three of us that are in the high school realm all the time. So what have you found that you wish parents knew about being connected with their kids through this time and making sure that they have that careful balance of being a part of their lives?
Yeah, I think it's all about There's a part in the book where we talk about this, like just making sure that you parent like you did when they were in elementary school and grade school, like just really holding them close. Um, and just making intentional time to spend with them, and whatever that looks like for your family. It might be dinner once a week, or it might be,
up a little bit. I can fix that, don't
my
worry.
15-year-old doesn't drive yet, so I get to pick him up from school on certain days when I can. And it's just making these spaces to have conversations and just really being intentional about that. And I think that also kind of blends into life, right? When you think about friendships or any of our relationships, it's just about like making that intentional time and putting that in there so that, that you can have that relationship. And it's no different with our kids, especially. And sometimes, like I'll have parents come in and be like, my teen hates me. They don't want to be anywhere near me. And I'm like, oh no. And and I just want to be like, that is not what they tell me. They want you in their life. They want you at back to school night. They want you at their sports game or their play. I hear that so much, like, oh, my parents work all the time, or they've got other things going on. I just wish they would take, one day and spend it with me. And so I think my advice from what I hear in my office on the daily is, to spend that time, even when you don't like them, spend that time with them, even when they're driving you crazy, just make that space, even if it's only a half hour.
Yeah. I mean, spending time with them, but isn't that so challenging when it does seem like they don't want you around? Like, what advice do you give parents who they really do feel as though my kid doesn't want me around them? So, what am I supposed, how do I get myself to be a part of their life when they really give out all the vibes that no, I don't want you a part of my life?
You know what? It might be something as simple. I think Cheryl we had talked about this before, like just texting. Sometimes it's just texting them good night every night, hey, I know you're not home yet, or you're at this, but good night in case I don't see you, or I'm going to be home late tonight. Just wanted to say good night. It's just these little things that you can do every day. And again, it can be like just planning one dinner a week, one dinner as a family a week, even if it's like only half the family can do this time. You just have that set time, and whoever makes it, but it's on the calendar. When my son was when my sons first went to high school, I had a good friend who was kind of just giving me advice. And she said, I have a date night with each of my kids, just like I do with my husband. Like, it's time that we have. And so I started that on, it was like Fridays, early Friday evening. I would take my one son out to dinner. And then later on, it was like Thursday for my other. But when I would miss that or say like, hey, I'm not going to be able to make our dinner tonight, my son would be like, hey, what? Because it was just, even though it was short and sometimes it was half an hour, it was like this time that was on the books for us. And I didn't realize how special that was to them until later, when they could say like, when you did that, that meant a lot, because I was priority, even though you were always, I was a busy mom and, busy professional mom. And so my time wasn't as much as I would have liked. Kind of how Sarah said, I grew up with a mom that stayed home. So the mom guilt is a real thing for us people that work and so work outside of the home. And so, yeah, that part meant a lot. And I didn't get to hear that until he was like 18. And he said, when you did that during high school? And so little things like that.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. You know what? That reminded me of a story that recently happened with my daughter. We took her out to dinner and we were talking, and all of a sudden she started on this little rant, and she goes, kids today, they just don't get outside enough. She's like, when I was young, I used to play outside all the time until the streetlights went on. And then you guys told me to come in for the streetlights. And Richard and I both looked at each other like, what? When did that happen? It's like, but that probably happened like 4 times in her life. Our guilt, our parent guilt says, oh my gosh, our kid has been on the internet way too much. Oh my gosh, COVID happened when she was right in the middle, and then she was trapped in her house, and all of this stuff that goes on in our head. But just the fact that we both looked at each other, and she's all, yeah, you guys did that all the time. We're like, yeah, oh yeah, you were outside all the time. You should remember that for sure. But sometimes they don't remember all of these details that we carry as parents. They actually do remember the times when they were outside, and the times when they spent time with you, and the time when you text them. And sometimes their memory remembers that like that was the way it always was. So that's how important it is that we, make those intentional efforts, even if it's not as often as we want.
And I think that you're like, I completely agree. I think that goes into perception, right? It's not really, our perception is always different. I know when I talk to my parents, my perception is very different than what they experience, what they might have experienced as being my parent. But I think that's one thing where questioning and asking your child, like, hey, when, what do you remember, or when do you remember us talking, or when is a good time for me to hear about your day? I have one son who wants to tell me everything and just, kind of pour out everything in at night before he goes to bed. And the other one doesn't want that. He wants that downtime kind of for quiet time for himself. And so
Hmm.
you really just got to find what works for each kid. It might be a car ride for one, and it might be at the end of the day for another, or it might be, texting and, communicating that way. But I think it's true. It's that perception of what they're experiencing. And sometimes it just, you got to ask.
Hmm. Yeah. And we see a lot of that as counselors, where the perception of what the lens that the child is seeing something in, um, is there's always that. And then there's what's actually happening. And then the perception that the parent's having. They're all different. They're all three very different.
Right.
And so I think it is important for us as parents to stop and pause and be like, it is, it's okay and actually beneficial to look at things through their eyes, because I think we get stuck as they grow up thinking they need to see it through our eyes. They need to see it from our perspective. And then, really, though, do they? Maybe we need to start by seeing it from their perspective. Have you, I mean, I don't know if you guys even address that in the book, but I'm just talking about it. It's true. What do you guys think about that?
I think teaching empathy too goes into that. So it is their perspective, but on the and not to counteract what I
No,
just
no. Yeah.
indicated, but I think it's also about having them understand kind of where we are as parents sometimes
Mm-hmm.
too. This is the reason why I had to set this boundary, right? This is, you might not see it as a safety issue, but I do. And I love you, and I'm concerned about that. We can have a conversation about it, especially as they get older, right? Because then we have to start kind of having them problem solve and process those things, because they're going to be doing those things on their own. But I think it's really a good opportunity using those active listening skills, which we really talk about in that book a lot, speaking less as a parent and listening more, but also using those teachable moments so that we
Yeah.
can interact with them and let them know this is empathy, or this is other people's perspectives matter too, which for a teenager, sometimes that's a tricky, that's a tricky one with brain development. But it's okay to still pour it in, because like you were saying earlier, it's not just how they think about today. We're seed planting for today to see how how that plays out later on when they're 24 and they're finally telling us, right? Oh, I remember you might have been onto something then, Mom. That was a very dangerous situation that I was or could have been in. So
We talked a little bit, we didn't deep dive, but we talked a little bit just about frontal lobe development. And so we talk about this scenario, and we hear this a lot where, like, oh, a teen crashes a car or does something that's kind of dangerous, and parents are like, they'll tell us, like, what are they thinking? And my answer is always, sometimes I'm like, well,
It's okay.
technically they're not. And so when they tell you, I don't know why I did it, Mom or Dad, that's usually because they don't think about it at that time. They're front of, like, everything, their reason and the part of the brain that kind of tells us, like, hey, that's not a good idea, maybe you should rethink that. Theirs doesn't work so well. It's not done growing. So Sarah, maybe you can jump in on that. But that's kind of my thing of it, kind of how I explain to parents without being able to be this, neuroscientist. But it's definitely, they're not done cooking. So they really mean that. All their emotions are just out there, and they don't regulate like we regulate with our adult brains.
That's true.
yeah, I definitely think it's that whole, concept. I actually have a friend who read the book, and he said that that was one of the best pieces of advice, was just the idea that kind of keeping it in the back of our head as far as discipline, not to say that we just say, oh, it's okay, your brain's not developed, but just kind of giving a little bit of grace and some understanding for why that happens. And it actually helps us mood regulate first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can change our anger into compassion a little bit and kind of understanding, okay, of course I am going to have feelings because your safety was compromised. However, let me kind of mood regulate myself. And we were talking about that earlier, right? With self-care, like, let me calm myself down. And then kind of think about, all right, this is your brain's not going to be developed for into your 20s. So we'll kind of give you a little grace there. But then kind of having that conversation again and having them learn, even though you were impulsive, you can kind of work on those impulsive things and how do you problem solve and make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a dangerous situation like that, hopefully again. I think realistically, it does help to go, okay, but you weren't not thinking completely. You're just not developed completely, right? So there is some choice still there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's still important to continue the conversation with choice. But remember, to discipline means to teach. And that is something that's really helpful to kind of keep in the back of our minds too, because we want to have a conversation about it. That's why it's important for us to regulate ourselves, maybe even kind of like, okay, everybody's safe now, hopefully, right? And then we're going to continue this conversation a little bit. Of course, there's got to be punishments. Of course, there's got to be grounding, but or whatever it might look like. I don't know.
Whatever they do. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think more importantly, it's that conversation. But it does, and I even tell kids all the time, your brain is not developed completely. So you might want to have some conversations or at least try to trust your gut, listen to your intuition. If it doesn't feel right, it's not, right? So we're kind of tapping into other skills besides just brain development. But it is something real, and it is something that I think as adults and teens, we need to consider and think about.
Also, like kind of having a plan with them. And so I was military, so we would drill for everything. And so one of the good things with kids is like when my son started going to parties, I was like, okay, so let's say there is drinking or drugs there and that's not something you're wanting to do and you need to get home, but you went with your friend. What's the plan for the night when that happens? And so I know my oldest son would always use my mom checks me when I get home. I can't do that. Or usually I was always the one that was used as a scapegoat, which I was fine with. Or it was like, they knew they could call us at any time of the night if there wasn't someone there that could get them home or if they were in a jam. So just kind of preemptively making sure that your kids have a plan for when they are put in these situations that all our kids are going to be put in at one time or another. We can't be with them 24/7. And so just kind of having them walk through it before it happens. So that way it's kind of there a little bit.
That's a good idea. That's a really good idea. Do you have, is there some of that stuff that we can learn about in the book? Do you guys kind of like talk about the getting ready for these challenging situations?
Yes. And it's kind of that conversation that that's in there as part of those tips of just kind of being proactive in those conversations, right? We were teenagers. And I know that, the choices that you make, if you have a plan, if you have a way out, if you want one, if you have all of those things, that is going to be so helpful. Again, like Sarah said, I will always always blame me, no problem. Or you can call me and I won't ask the questions, right? We will, I just want to make sure you're safe. We'll get home and then we will, maybe have a discussion later on about it. But we want to make sure that we're keeping them safe. But in our book, we also give the tip of having, being the hub. So having your house as the place where maybe you have the friends over and things like that sometimes. It gives you more control over the situation, right? In our book, we talk about we're not the parents that are going to be providing the keg, right? We're not doing that. We need to make sure that the place is safe. And the truth is, a lot of times kids like that because then they're thinking, okay, well, I don't have pressure over at Sarah's house or, whatever it might be. There's a lot of those unspoken things that kids talk to us about that we know is true, but they're not going to say in front of their friends and they might not talk to their parents about it. But being the hub and seeing her though around, you're going to hear the conversation. And more than likely, the other kids, you're going to be a safe person for them, and they're going to start asking you advice about their lives too. So it's interesting.
Or being the one willing to take everybody home, or
right.
From any place, really, not even a dangerous place, just any place, being that person that they know that they're comfortable in your car, they're comfortable in your house, that kind of thing.
And we talk about that too, that you're not friends with your kid. A lot of people say, oh, they're my best friend. No, you shouldn't be a friend at this age. That comes later. Like right now, you want to be the parent. And sometimes that's tough. You don't want your kid to say, oh, my mom's my best friend, my dad's my best friend. No, you do not want to be that. You want to be the parent and you want to have boundaries and you want to be that person that is safe and is going to be the developed frontal lobe. And so if you can be that for your child, you can be friends later when they're grown, then you be friends. But when they're teenagers, you have to be the one that does set that bar high for them.
I feel as though it's important that we talk in this conversation just about just about what you guys think parents really need to know. What's the bottom line?
I think when we were writing this book, one of the things we wanted to keep in mind was that we're all doing the best we can, and I think that kept coming through. And I know as just everyday humans, we're always doing the best we can, and I think with parenting, we try so hard. Like one of my favorite things as a counselor is I always tell my new counselees, like, parents come to you with the best that they have, and that's their kids. And so I think that we just have to keep that in mind always as parents, is that we really are doing the best we can. And we have to have compassion for ourselves, compassion for our kids, compassion for each other, and just really practice that. And I think if we model that, then, model kindness, the world's better.
Yeah, that's so true. Kindness to ourselves and kindness to our kids, even when things get tough, it's never an easy road. Raising kids is hard, let's just get frank. It's not an easy thing.
No, I know. I think that, and that's the main thing. I think that people just having your community and your own people as parents that lift each other up, that celebrate each other, that talk about the real hard things, creating some vulnerability in your lives with the relationships that you decide to have. It's so important so that we can understand that we're human, we go through things, but at the end of the day, we're doing the best that we can. But we can all use new skills. I know I sure can. And it doesn't end there. So I think it's just kind of providing that piece too, of just being open to receiving some new information, new knowledge, and moving forward when we make a mistake, because we all do. I've probably made 10 today, and I'll probably make another 10 before the end of the night. So it is what it is. And we got to keep moving onward and upward.
So is that kind of why you guys wanted to put this book out into the world? Is for that reason alone, just knowing that we need more, that we can just kind of like be compassionate to each other and get a little word of wisdom in there at the same time?
Yeah. And I think that, when me and Sarah were writing this, we really kind of were thinking about the audience. The audience, if somebody picks up this book, that means that they care, right? That they care about learning something new. It might be something that they just need to revisit. It might not even be. I still look at that book and I think, you know what? I haven't poured in some extra date nights, with the kids or time like that. So I need to revisit that. And that's okay. It's not guilting or shaming. It's about moving forward and kind of saying, yeah, here's some simple tips. Here, it's a simple read. It's some simple information. Whether you're listening to wonderful podcasts like yours, whether it's picking up some tips on books, just kind of revisiting that and staying afloat with what we can do, with our time, because they grow up fast. And, it's important to kind of remember that those big emotions, those big feelings, they're temporary, but the things that we pour into our kids, we're hoping that that's the longevity of their lives.
Yeah. And like you said, we don't come with the parenting doesn't come with a manual. The teens certainly don't come with a manual.
Yes.
What a great conversation. Thank you, Sarah Hainsworth. Thank you, Sarah Gonzolez. And you got to go over and get that book. Let me tell you something. We talk about solution-focused conversation skills all the time. And this was a crash course on what we can do in a practical way to lean close to our teenagers and really meet them where they're at. And even if you don't have teenagers, I want you to go out and try out these type of skills today. Connect in a brand new way, seeing things from their point of view, which is a lot of what I was able to get out of this conversation right after I talked to Sarah and Sarah. I kind of just had a little bit different view of my daughter. And I was thankful for the times when I was able to just listen to her and her other friends chatter in the back seat when I'm driving them here and there. And connection, it takes effort. And I'm glad that you stayed with me for this entire podcast. Now, remember, you can hop over to sharekretz.com. You can take my 3-day conversation challenge for absolutely free right now. It outlines what I talked about in my TEDx talk, how to lead with hope, solution-focused conversation navigation. And you can check the show notes for all of the other details that you may need. And it's time for me to wrap up this podcast. So remember to live solution-focused. Bye-bye.